and it contained violent and graphic images of my child and me being murdered.
Okay. Oh, it's just a film, mate. Right. Right. Tea time. Ugh.
And that's why you should always be careful when taking honey from a bear. Oh dear, poor chap. I don't think that spoon will be coming out anytime soon. Now, on with tonight's regularly scheduled broadcast of shows you just can't apologise enough about Dr. Lecter's appetizers. When he said he was going to be cooking with people, we were under the impression that he meant something else. So in its place, we are repeating yesterday's documentary about that lovable rogue Michael Myers called Finding My Voice, where he discusses in detail the hardships of the Halloween season and why he just wants a hug. And after that, we are going to have some news about some of our upcoming specials, followed by...
Oh, you're being paranoid, mate. Maybe you need some medicine. Or maybe just a strange doctor. Just a dream. Oh.
Hello everyone and welcome to another Rewind review. In this long overdue video we are taking a look at a spooky horror movie that traumatised audiences when it first released. And no, it's not Nosferatu. The movie that I'll be talking about is The Babadook. Released in 2014 and based on a short film from 2005 called Monster, The Babadook sees a mother and her young child falling into a deep well of paranoia when an eerie children's book titled Mr. Babadook manifests in their home. Written and directed by Jennifer Kent, the movie stars Essie Davis, Noah Wiseman, Hayley McElhenney, Daniel Henshall and Tim Purcell. The Babadook, do 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 do. The Babadook, do. I am so sorry. And yes, even though I don't seem to have a concept of time these days, the intro skit just didn't feel right without the Halloween title card. Anyway, 2014 was an interesting year for me, not only because I was watching more reviews on YouTube, but because I was slowly starting to take more of an interest in horror movies. I was still quite resistant about actually watching them, but I was finding myself getting more drawn to them. And because I was watching so many YouTube channels at the time, I kept hearing about this movie when it first released. I didn't know anything about the story, I'd never seen the short film that this is based on. All I knew was that this was a horror movie. But every single review that I was coming across were all really hyping this movie up as something not only really good, but something, especially Mr. Babadook himself, as something really scary. And they hyped up just how scary this movie was so much that when I was watching, I think it might have been Watch Mojo's top 10 movies of 2014, and I got to the honourable mentions section, and they played a clip from this movie. And the clip that they played was the scene where Amelia gets a phone call, and you can hear Mr. Babadook on the other line. Babadook, dook, dook. Needless to say, it really freaked me out, and it properly gave me the shivers. I also remember that Under the Skin came out in the UK in 2014, and several reviews were saying that that was the most disturbing movie of that year. Oh no. This was. If one 5-second clip was able to freak me out so much, imagine what a full 94-minute movie was able to do. The first time I saw this movie, it properly freaked me out to the point where for a few days afterwards, anytime I was trying to get about the house and it was night time and it was dark, I'd have to turn the lights on. And it was like that for the first couple of times that I saw this. But I actually haven't seen this movie in quite a few years, and since 2024 was actually the 10th anniversary of the Babadook, I wanted to revisit it with my new, much more horror-resistant mindset. Seriously, I have seen more horror movies at the cinema within the last 6 months than I have my entire life. And while, yes, the Babadook did not freak me out as much as it used to, that's not to say that I didn't think this movie was any less good. This is still a fantastic movie. The story of the Babadook is about a widowed mother called Amelia who struggles with her out-of-control 6-year-old son, Samuel. And on one night, Amelia stumbles across a mysterious and disturbing pop-up book titled Mr. Babadook, and Samuel becomes convinced that the Babadook is real and coming to kill them both. And as Samuel becomes more unpredictable and his hallucinations spiral out of control, Amelia starts to see glimpses of a sinister presence all around her, and it slowly dawns on her that this supposed Babadook might actually be real. So as you may have guessed based on that synopsis, this movie is a full-on psychological horror movie, and not, as some people initially thought it was going to be, a monster movie. I blame the marketing for that. It does have a monster, admittedly, but that's not what this movie is about. It's not a fun horror movie, it's not a jump scare kind of horror movie. I mean, it does have jump scares peppered throughout this movie, but they're quite subtle and quite clever. That's not where the horror comes from, and it doesn't rely on cheap jump scares either to make it tense like so many others do. What this movie is a very dark exploration of grief, repression, trauma, and varying forms of depression. And there's a really slow burning tension that creeps up on you over the course of the movie, which does make this uncomfortable to watch. It's also a lot more cohesive and a lot more easier to understand than the short film Monster was, because the messaging, the themes, I feel like they are better explored in this, because not only are they actually given a bit more focus, they're given more time to be explored. I've only very recently seen the short film for the first time ever, like literally a few weeks ago, and I can see a lot of similarities. It's only 10 minutes long, but it does feature a very similar premise minus the book, and it's also written and directed by Jennifer Kent, and this was actually her directorial debut. And while it is a great short film with a genuinely nasty jump scare, I didn't find it as easy to pick up on the metaphors. The metaphors and the themes are absolutely there, but they are handled in a much more subtler way, to the point where it is a lot harder to get, at least in my opinion. The movie is able to expand on everything a lot better and a lot more clearly, while also adding a load of new elements too, the biggest of which being the Babadook itself. If it's in a word or a look, you can't get rid of a Babadook. And trust me, you do not want this thing running around your place. Oh my god, this thing is scary. Not just from how it looks, with its simplistic and exaggerated design of elongated limbs, large looming figure, top hat and a clown-like appearance, but how the Babadook is used and what it's capable of. You don't always need to see it to feel its influence, and the more that the characters try to deny its existence, the stronger it gets. It's very wisely kept off screen for the most part, and when you do see it, it's either a very brief shot or it's cloaked in shadow, but you know it's nearby from that really creepy cricket-like buzzing sound effect that they've gone for, and that alligator snarl as well. It's very effective, it maintains its mystery, and it does make you uncomfortable, especially if you have the right sound system or headphones. I mean, the sound design overall is pretty great. It's very atmospheric, and it's used in a way that adds tension, suspense, and that creeping feeling of unease. Plus, I love that they add some voice mixing effects and distortion, especially when it comes to Mr. Babadook. It gives the Babadook a much more eerie and unnatural presence, and it makes it a hell of a lot scarier. Visually, I think this movie looks really good, with some very clever cinematography and some excellent lighting. It's got a very subdued colour palette, almost looking monochrome at times, which does make sense considering that the short film that this is based on was black and white. And likewise, I think that this movie could work quite well in black and white, especially how it is that they balance costume colours and backdrops. The house environments and costumes are a mixture of whites, blacks, greys and dark navies, and especially the house have very prominent dark shadows. And under pale light, any splash of colour, mainly red like the book or Amelia's dress or any sort of splatter of blood, it does stand out a lot more and it does draw your eye to it. And because this movie looks so dark, I mean, it's not so dark that you can't see what's going on, but it's dark enough and they use shadows effectively so that any effects that they use throughout this, they can kind of hide what it is that they do. This was a very practically oriented movie with lots of in-camera effects. And so when it comes to the Babadook itself, they use a lot of stop motion techniques which help give it that unnatural movement. It is very clever and it's very effective. And because so many of the effects are done for real in this movie, it does make them look a lot better and it does add an extra layer of believability. But of course, what grounds this movie beyond anything else is the characters. Even though there are a few characters that do appear in this with varying degrees of impact on the overall plot, all played very well by the way, this feels almost like a two-hander. The whole focus of the movie is on Essie Davis as Amelia and her son Samuel, played by Noah Wiseman. Both of them give absolutely stellar performances, especially Essie Davis, who I honestly think gives one of the best horror movie performances I have ever seen. And that's not to say that I don't think that Noah Wiseman gives a brilliant performance either. He absolutely does. And don't forget, he was about 6 years old when he made this. It's a very difficult role to play, but I think that he absolutely nailed it. And please don't go in this and start saying things like, oh, I don't like this, the kid's annoying. That's the point. He is meant to be that sort of annoying, troublesome kid at the beginning of the movie, but you are still able to empathise and care for him by the end. And that's why I think that Noah Wiseman's performance is so great, because he balances both of those elements really well. But the entire movie is done through Amelia's perspective. The Babadook does an amazing job of establishing Amelia's frustrations and piling them up as the tension increases. Like her sleep being disrupted, toothache, problems with her sister, problems at her job, and yes, this also includes Samuel and his increasingly disruptive behaviour. And then you add to that her repressed grief and loneliness, and yeah, you get it. That's why the performances from both actors are so good. You see it all unfolding and you understand Amelia's frustrations and why she seems almost disconnected from everyone at the start. And because the performances are so believable and grounded, when it all kicks off and it risks becoming quite over the top, the performances anchor it down and give it some proper weight. They are both brilliant and they are a big part of the reason why the Babadook is so good. And as I said, I feel like everyone who does appear in this does do well in the small role that they play, like Hayley McElhenney as Amelia's sister Claire and Daniel Henshall as her co-worker Robbie. Now he's a keeper. And when it comes to the soundtrack for this movie, we have a pretty decent one from composer Jed Kurzel. It does have that slightly generic modern horror movie vibe to it, with lots of like low tones and rumbles, that sort of like sound to try and add tension, but it does have some very unique elements to this. Like there's a really creepy piano theme whenever the Babadook is mentioned. It's kind of like the Babadook's theme. And it is used throughout this movie really effectively, and it's quite disorienting as well. And that main theme, even though it is quite subtle and it is quite simple compared to a lot of other horror movie themes, I do think that this is quite memorable. Plus, I love how stripped back the soundtrack is at times and how it's used. As I said, this movie doesn't have any cheap jump scares, and one thing that most movies do, like most horror movies do, whenever they have a jump scare, they always have that really loud, like, sounds in the soundtrack. This movie doesn't do that, and that's one of the reasons why I feel like the jump scares are a lot more effective in this one, because they are quite silent and they sometimes aren't even accompanied by any sort of sound. They just happen and it catches you off guard. It's just a pity that we don't get any songs. Babadook, dook, dook, in a word or in a look. Babadook, dook, dook, it will never ever leave. Last one, I promise. The soundtrack is very good overall, and I do think that it is used very effectively. One thing that I am a little bit conflicted on with this movie, and this is going to be very nitpicky, I'm not a huge fan of some of the editing choices. And when I say some, it's literally only a few. It's only really the one scene that does stand out for me because it does feel like the way that it's edited, it does feel like there's either something missing or something's been cut. And it's the sequence where Robbie goes to Amelia's house just to check how they both are. And he meets Samuel for the first time and he realises that he isn't sick. And as that scene plays out, it jumps to the next bit and Robbie's gone and we never see him for the rest of the movie. So it does feel like something was cut. I don't know if there is any deleted scenes. I've only seen the movie itself, but as it stands, it does feel like something is missing. But that is literally the only complaint about the Babadook that I have. Overall, this is a phenomenal psychological horror movie. It's highly creepy and unsettling with some very creative cinematography, a good soundtrack, sound design and pacing, with some very well explored characters brought to life by incredibly talented actors. And then throw in a properly scary and original monster with a simple yet effective design, and you have yourself a truly disturbing experience. As I said, the only criticism I have is a few editing choices, but that's it. This is easily one of the best horror movies to come from the 2010s. It's original, it's gripping, and as an added bonus, it's completely standalone, which you don't really get with horror movies nowadays. In my honest opinion, and while it might not be something that everyone likes, I do think that this is a must watch. Just keep in mind, and to reiterate, this is not a monster movie. It is a brilliant and disturbingly dark movie and absolutely worth your time. Go and see it. So with all that being said, my rating for the Babadook is a 9 out of 10. Well, that is pretty much everything I want to say for this video, so if you have watched this video, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy this content, please be sure to like, subscribe and hit that notification button. If you have seen the Babadook, let me know down in the comments what you think about it, plus if you have any suggestions for any future Rewind reviews you would like to see me do, let me know down below. But until next time, thank you very much for watching, and remember, don't let it in. Bye-bye.